My parents banned all kids from their Christmas party, even my son. But when I arrived, I walked into a shock. My parents told me they were having an adults-only Christmas party this year. No kids, not even my little boy. But when I walked into their house that night, I saw my sister's 3 kids running around the living room with paper crowns on their heads. Later, when I confronted my parents, they actually said, "These children deserve to be here." In that moment, something inside me snapped, and I knew I was done supporting them. I never thought I'd be a widow at 34, but here I am. My name is Lauren, and that Christmas was the night everything finally broke. That morning, like so many others, I was sitting at my small kitchen table at 7 a.m., trying to get my 7-year-old son Oliver ready for school. The soft light from the window made the cereal bowls and scattered crayons on the table look almost peaceful, but I was fighting back tears as I buttoned his jacket and reminded him to grab his backpack. It's been months since the accident at the construction site took my husband Ben from us, but some days it still feels like it happened yesterday. The first few months after his death were a blur. Endless paperwork, phone calls, late-night email chains, and countless sleepless nights staring at the ceiling. Honestly, don't know how I would have made it through without my in-laws, Carol and Frank. They've been absolute angels. Every single afternoon they pick Oliver up from school so I can stay at my job as a marketing manager. I swing by their cozy little house after work to get him, and each time I walk in, it smells like something warm is in the oven, and I hear Oliver laughing at some story Frank is telling him. And every time, without fail, Carol tries to slip money into my hands. "Carol, really, I can't take this," I told her last week, pushing the envelope back toward her as she tried to sneak it into my purse by the front door. "Maureen, honey, we want to help," she insisted, her kind eyes meeting mine. Her voice was gentle but firm. "We know the insurance company paid well, but your family, let us do this." She's right about the insurance. The company paid out $300,000 after Ben's death. Between that and my income, Oliver and I are okay financially. Not rich, not struggling, just okay. But with Carol and Frank, it's never just about the money. It's about the way they show up. It's the love, the time, the rides, the bedtime stories. If only my own parents were even half as supportive. Growing up, Mom and Dad made it painfully clear that my older sister Megan was their golden child. She could do no wrong. That favoritism never went away. It just shifted forms as we got older. And now, it's like they've extended that same special status to Megan's kids over my son. Last weekend was typical. Oliver was bouncing with excitement in the car, kicking his heels against the seat, talking about how he was going to show Grandpa his new drawing. But within 20 minutes of arriving at my parents' house, Mom was already complaining. "Why does the clock make that sound?" Oliver asked, pointing up at their antique grandfather clock as it chimed, his brows furrowing with curiosity. "How does it work inside?" "Lauren, can't you control him?" Mom sighed, rolling her eyes as if his questions were some huge burden. "He's always asking questions about everything." She glanced toward the corner of the living room. "Megan's kids never give us this much trouble." Dad nodded in agreement without even looking up from the coffee table, where he was opening his laptop. "Here, Oliver, why don't you play some games instead?" he said. "Look, I downloaded some new ones for you." But Oliver didn't want games. He wanted to talk, to learn, to understand things. That's who he is. Meanwhile, Megan's 3 kids were slumped on the couch, completely absorbed in their phones, barely acknowledging anyone. And somehow, that was what my parents called good behavior. I've learned to bite my tongue. Growing up as the less favored child, I got used to these comparisons a long time ago. Now I just sit there, smile tightly, and stay quiet while they praise Megan's parenting and quietly tear mine apart. At least, I told myself, they do help sometimes, watching Oliver when I have late meetings, or picking him up if Carol and Frank are busy. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday night dinner at my parents' house when things started to shift. The warning signs were there the moment I walked in. Mom had made my favorite lasagna, the cheesy kind she only bothers with when she wants something. The kitchen smelled like baked pasta and garlic, and the table was set a little nicer than usual. Dad was unusually chatty, asking about my job, my boss, Oliver's school, his grades, everything. They were circling around something. I just didn't know what yet. "So, Lauren," Mom said finally, carefully cutting her lasagna into perfect little squares, "we've been meaning to ask you something." I looked up, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Okay. How much was Ben's life insurance payout?" The question hit me like a slap. I nearly choked on my water, staring at her, completely blindsided by how casually she'd brought up something so personal and painful. Maybe it was the shock. Maybe I was just tired of keeping details from them. Whatever it was, the words slipped out. "About 300,000, I said quietly. The fork in Mom's hand clattered against her plate. Dad's head snapped up so fast I thought he might get whiplash. They both stared at me like I'd just announced I'd won the lottery. "Well," Mom said slowly, setting her fork down deliberately, "what are you planning to do with all that money?" I could feel their expectations pressing down on me like a weight on my chest. "I've invested it," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's for Oliver's future. His college education, maybe helping him buy an apartment when he's older. Ben and I always talked about that, but that's years away." "That's years away," Dad cut in, waving his hand dismissively. "You should be thinking about the present, Lauren, about yourself and your family." The way he said family made it very clear he wasn't talking about me and Oliver. I knew that tone. It was the same one they used when they bragged about helping Megan with her house down payment or funding her lavish wedding. "You could do so much with that money now," Mom chimed in, leaning forward eagerly. "You could help your family, people who need it today, not save it all for some distant future that might not even—" "I'm not discussing my money anymore," I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. They both sat back. Dad's face clouded over with that familiar look of disappointment I'd seen my entire life. Mom pressed her lips into that thin, tight line that always meant trouble was brewing. Dinner dragged by in tense silence, broken only by the clink of cutlery against plates. I could feel their resentment from across the table. I thought that would be the end of it, at least for a while. Knowing my parents, I expected the usual silent treatment for a month, maybe more. That was their favorite punishment whenever I didn't fall in line. My surprise, Mom called just a week later. "We're having a family dinner on Sunday, if nothing had happened. Megan and the kids will be there too. You have to come, sweetheart." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I agreed. Part of me still wanted to believe maybe they were just trying to reconnect. When I arrived that Sunday, Megan was already there with her kids, all of them glued to their phones as usual, screens lighting up their faces in the dim dining room. As we sat down to eat, Megan launched into a detailed monologue about rising prices, rent, groceries, gas, everything. "Bills are just piling up," she sighed, passing the bowl of potatoes across the table. "Everything is so expensive now. Your father and I barely have enough for a normal life anymore." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, talking about how grocery prices had gone up and how high the utility bills were getting. Dad just shook his head like the whole world was conspiring against them. Then Megan cleared her throat and sat up a little straighter. I knew that look. She was about to perform. "I've been thinking," she announced, looking around the table with that self-righteous expression she'd perfected since we were kids. "Lauren and I should help Mom and Dad financially." She placed a hand over her chest. "I'll send them $500 every month. I wish I could do more, but you know how it is. Ryan's the only one working, and with the kids—" She trailed off, letting that hang in the air before turning to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "But you, Lauren," she continued smoothly, "you should send them $1,000 every month." "Excuse me?" I nearly choked on my water. Well, it makes sense, Megan pressed on. You earn really well at your job, and you only have one child to support. Plus, with your situation, you have other income now. My blood boiled at the way she tiptoed around Ben's death, like she couldn't bring herself to say it out loud. I wanted to scream that I was a widow, that I didn't have a second paycheck coming in, that the other income she was referring to was money meant for Oliver's future, not some shared family fund. But before I could get a word out, Mom was already clapping her hands together, delighted, and Dad was beaming like it was Christmas morning. "Oh, girls," Mom exclaimed, "you don't know what this means to us." I sat there, torn between anger and disbelief, watching their expectant faces. I could feel that old familiar need for their approval creeping up, tightening around my throat. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn their love, and now they were putting a price tag on it. "Fine," I heard myself say. "I'll do it." The first transfer hurt the most. $1,000 gone with a few clicks. I stared at the confirmation screen on my phone, telling myself it would be worth it if it meant more support with Oliver, more involvement from my parents, maybe even a softer tone from them for once. But that fantasy unraveled fast. "Mom, could you pick Oliver up from school today?" I asked one afternoon over the phone. "Carol has a doctor's appointment, and I have a late meeting." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," Mom's voice crackled through the speaker. "I've got such a headache today. You know how my migraines get." That became the pattern. Every time I needed help with Oliver, there was a brand new excuse. She was busy. She was tired. She had errands. Her back hurt. The car needed service. Meanwhile, left my account like clockwork every month. One particularly frustrating Thursday, after Mom claimed she couldn't watch Oliver because she might be coming down with something, I ended up calling Carol in desperation. "Of course we'll pick him up," Carol said without a moment's hesitation. "Frank's already heading to the school. He loves their little chats on the drive home. Oliver's been telling him all about their science project." I hung up and sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, fighting back tears. $1,000 a month bought me nothing but excuses from my own mother, while my mother-in-law dropped everything to help without ever asking for a cent. Before I knew it, December had crept up on me. We'd always spent Christmas Eve at my parents' house. It was tradition. Everyone gathered there, exchanging gifts, sharing a big meal, crowded around the tree while kids ripped wrapping paper and adults drank coffee around the dining table. A week before Christmas, I was sitting at the table with Oliver, helping him with his math homework, little scribbles of multiplication problems covering the page, when my phone lit up with Mom's name. "Lauren, honey," she started, using that sweet, syrupy tone that always preceded bad news. "About Christmas Eve." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "We've decided to do something different this year," she said. "We're having an adults-only party. No children allowed." The pencil in my hand snapped in half. "It's just that we want to do something more sophisticated this year," Mom continued, as if she were talking about changing the color of the tablecloth. "You know, wine, adult conversation, grown-up time." "But it's Christmas," I protested, standing up and walking a few steps away so Oliver wouldn't hear. "What am I supposed to do with Oliver?" "Oh, that's easy," she replied, her voice light and dismissive. "You can leave him with Carol and Frank. They'd love to have him, I'm sure. You'll come by around 7, okay?" After hanging up, I just stood there for a moment, staring at my son. He was still hunched over his worksheet at the table, tongue poking out slightly as he focused on his multiplication tables, completely unaware that his grandmother had just uninvited him from Christmas. My heart ached. He looked so much like Ben when he concentrated like that. I spent the next week going back and forth in my head. The idea of celebrating Christmas without Oliver felt completely wrong, but skipping the family gathering entirely seemed dramatic. I knew exactly how my parents would spin that story. Eventually, I came up with what felt like a compromise. I'd leave Oliver with Carol and Frank for a few hours. I'd make a brief appearance at my parents' house, show my face, exchange gifts, say hello to everyone, and then head back to celebrate properly with my son and my in-laws. On Christmas Eve, I pulled up to my parents' house alone, the sky already dark and the air sharp and cold. Their driveway was packed with cars, more than usual for our family gatherings. I stepped out, grabbed the bag of carefully wrapped presents from the back seat, and walked up the front path. Even from outside, I could hear laughter and Christmas music spilling out into the night. For a second, I paused on the porch, my hand hovering over the doorknob, wondering if I was making a mistake. Then I opened the door, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. The house was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone was there, filling the living room and hallway. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. Running through the living room with paper crowns on their heads were Megan's 3 kids. Near the Christmas tree, I spotted my cousin Hannah's children helping themselves to cookies off a tray. As I looked around, more kids came into view. My cousin Luke's twins, my cousin Kelly's teenager leaning against the wall, scrolling on her phone between bites of fudge. The room suddenly felt too hot, too tight. I stood frozen in the doorway, the gift bag hanging limply from my hand as the reality sank in. This wasn't an adults-only party at all. It was a party where only my son wasn't welcome. My mind struggled to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. My Aunt Diane was the first to spot me. "Lauren, sweetheart," she called, hurrying over to wrap me in a hug that smelled like perfume and sugar cookies. She pulled back and glanced behind me. "Where's little Oliver? Don't tell me he's sick on Christmas Eve." Before I could answer, my cousin Matt chimed in from the couch. "Yeah, where's our favorite little scientist? Noah's been waiting to show him his new chemistry set." Other relatives started drifting over, all asking the same questions. Where was Oliver? Why had I come alone? Each innocent inquiry felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I couldn't form an answer. I couldn't explain what I barely understood myself. Through the crowd, I caught sight of my mother in the kitchen, calmly arranging cookies on a Christmas-themed platter as if everything was perfectly normal, as if she hadn't banned my child from being here. It was like she hadn't just cut her only grandson out of a family celebration. "Excuse me," I managed to say, pushing past my concerned relatives. My feet carried me toward the kitchen on autopilot, the sound of laughter and Christmas music dulling into a low hum behind me. With every step, the anger building in my chest grew heavier and sharper. "Mom," I said, my voice low and controlled as I reached the doorway. "Can we talk? Privately?" Something in my tone made her pause. She set the cookie platter down a little too carefully and glanced toward the living room. I led her into the hallway, away from the noise and the curious eyes. The light there was dimmer, more cramped, the only sound the muffled echo of carols drifting from the other room. "You told me this was an adults-only party," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You specifically told me not to bring Oliver. So why are Megan's kids here? Why are all the cousins' children here?" Mom straightened her sparkly Christmas sweater, suddenly fascinated by a loose thread on the sleeve. She avoided my eyes. "Well, that's different," she muttered. "Different how?" I demanded. "Those children," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the living room, "know how to behave at formal gatherings. They're well-mannered." I stared at her in disbelief. "Well-mannered?" I echoed. "Oliver is one of the most polite children I know. His teachers praise his behavior constantly. Carol and Frank always say—" "Oh, Carol and Frank," she cut in, rolling her eyes. "They spoil him. They encourage all those endless questions." She lifted her chin. "The other children, they deserve to be here more. They know their place." As if the universe wanted to make a point, a loud commotion erupted from the dining room. Megan's youngest, Tyler, had grabbed a handful of deviled eggs and was happily throwing them at his older sister. The eggs sailed across the room like little grenades, splattering against Emma's new Christmas dress. She let out a shriek that cut above the music. I turned back to my mother, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," I said calmly. "I can clearly see their superior manners on display." Mom's face hardened. "That's just children being children," she snapped. "But when Oliver starts asking questions about how things work, that's unacceptable behavior. Don't be so dramatic, Lauren. He's fine with Carol and Frank." Something in me shifted. "Fine," I said, my voice suddenly colder. "I'm leaving. I'm going back to my son." Mom shrugged and examined her manicure, as if we were discussing nothing more important than the weather. "Fine. Leave if you want to make a scene," she said. "But put your gifts under the tree first. We're opening them after dinner." Something snapped inside me as I watched her dismissive shrug. Before I could talk myself out of it, I turned and walked straight into the center of the living room. The lights from the tree blinked in the corner of my eye, and the chatter swirled around me until I stopped and drew in a breath. I cleared my throat loudly. The sound cut through the music and conversation. Heads turned. Voices faded mid-sentence. In a matter of seconds, every eye in the room was on me. "Several of you have asked why I came alone tonight," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "Why Oliver isn't here celebrating Christmas with his family." Megan started to move toward me, her hand half lifted as if to guide me away, but I raised my palm to stop her. "Let me finish," I said. "I'm here alone because a week ago, Mom called and told me this was an adults-only party. I was specifically told not to bring Oliver." "What?" My Aunt Diane's voice rang out, slicing through the silence. She looked around, eyes wide. "But all the children are here. We didn't know anything about a ban on kids." Uncle Peter frowned, glancing from his grandkids to my parents. "Yeah, we were told it was the usual family Christmas. No one said anything about adults only." Mom stepped forward, her face flushed. "Lauren, this isn't the time." "Oh, I think this is exactly the time," I continued, my voice rising slightly, "because you see, there wasn't really a ban on children. There was a ban on one child. My son, who apparently isn't good enough for this family's Christmas celebration." The room erupted into celebration. "All the things," later this contributor. "The room erupted into the sky, and share the worthy online the room and must look them the man. We don't have noticed the 12 meeting in the show as a couple of new laters of every street, but the room she had part of them contributor. The room is the way to wade into the part of them to me. He did not feel, and he list no. The room is not effect. He quickly for still people, because they would not meet it. They would not meet it's to relate, and they were timed it in the work. The room is perfectly because he's seen for the world. He was making some, and he was level to notice. The room is competitive into the butter, if the room is not meet it. The room is know that they would not meet it, and his part of them. Because of a title that they want meet it, they didn't meet it. The room is provides settleration. The room, he was an ability room there. He said they was an important, and they were formed to them. The room is a reported in the perk of them as well, with a know that he was flown, his everything me. The room, he's scared, the work to be. The room his raider groups, and they were friends to make it better. The room's Lesterly and confluted the company. The room has been celebrated, and they were part of them. The room his dependence, the work brings to be, and the war brings. The room is the room his people. He was placed to the world, and he does note. The room his most pretty cold. He had celebration. The room is the two things director has been a lot of the picture. The room his include has 140. The room his most pretty cooled, and he looked 40 of the room. The room his part of there has 140. The room his place has 140. The room his places has 116. The room his places well has 116. The room his provided his anything with him flacked. The room his place the dibdance to make through there. The room his provides in fived his part of the room. The room his places carrigly form, and he report. The room his provides something for them, his most pretty. The room his places his part of them. The room his places Krista change to make scene, he was paid in hard, and to Blake. The room his places his powerfulter. But the room his places 40, and he turted to be promote every. The room his places his community. The room his places part for me, he has part of, and its sake. The room his places Krista change, he cape a bigger feat for them, his long staff, which is part of his part for me, he can find out it better. All the things later, the room his post, av to you. The room his places his post pretty cold, he can find out me, the room his post produced. The room his places on his places, he came to dring a batter, his post produced. The room his places part of them, his part to play. The room his places part some flacked, and he put him. The room his places part of them, his part to be. The room his places are part of, the room his post produced. What the spect of the play, his part some flacked. All the things that the room his post pretty cooled, he caped a bigger feat for them, his post produced. What is it offer than G, he quick, later around. The room his places offer than the afternoon, his post pretty cooled, he caped a grieved place later, any turn. The room his places offer than the afternoon, his post pretty cooled, his important of the other different state. But he has provide by rate. The room his places offer, and he put him. The room his places pretty cooled, he can provide by highlined, his post produced. The room his places part of them, his post to be. Flushed, the room erupted into low murmurs. I saw shocked faces, disapproving glares directed at my parents, and confused kids staring between the adults, trying to understand what was happening. But that's not even the best part, I said, letting out a short, humorless laugh. While my son isn't good enough to attend Christmas, I'm apparently good enough to send my parents $1,000 every month. And Megan here, I gestured toward my sister, sends $500. Megan's husband, Ryan, who'd been half listening from his spot near the tree, snapped his head toward her. "Wait, what?" he said sharply. $500 every month? The color drained from Megan's face. Ryan's expression hardened as he turned fully to her. "You're sending your parents money every month?" he demanded. "From where, Megan? Our account barely covers our bills as it is." Megan's composure cracked. Her cheeks flushed red, and she looked between our parents and her husband like a cornered animal. "I never actually sent any money," she stammered. "Mom and Dad asked me to say I was sending $500 so Lauren would agree to help them financially. They said if she thought I was contributing too, she'd—" The silence that followed was heavy and electric. I watched realization wash over my relatives' faces as they put the pieces together. How my parents and sister had manipulated me into supporting them, all while deciding my son wasn't worthy of being in the house for Christmas. "You're telling me," my Aunt Linda's voice rang out, sharp and clear from near the hallway, "that you scammed your own daughter out of thousands of dollars? That you used one daughter to make up for spoiling the other, and then turned around and treated her child like he didn't belong?" She shook her head slowly. "That's low, even for you." The room erupted into overlapping voices, some expressing disgust, others demanding explanations. A few relatives looked like they wanted to sink into the floor. Megan was trying to explain herself to an increasingly furious Ryan, who now had his arms tightly crossed over his chest. My parents stood near the tree, their carefully crafted image of perfect hosts crumbling in front of everyone. I raised my hand. Somehow the room quieted again. "I have something else to say," I announced. Mom and Dad stood frozen by the Christmas tree, the blinking lights casting strange shadows across their pale faces. Megan's voice died off mid-sentence, and even Ryan turned his attention back to me. "From this moment on," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I will no longer be sending you any money, and I won't be maintaining any relationship with you or with Megan. I'm done." I didn't wait for their response. I turned, walked to the entryway, and set the bag of gifts down by the door. The sound of the front door closing behind me felt final, like the end of a chapter I should have finished a long time ago. Out in the cold night air, I took a shaky breath and pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened my banking app, but I didn't hesitate. With a few quick taps, I canceled the monthly transfer to my mother's account. It felt like cutting off a chain I'd been dragging behind me for months. The drive to Carol and Frank's house felt both endless and over in a heartbeat. My mind ping-ponged between anger, sadness, and an odd sense of relief. By the time I pulled into their driveway, my eyes were burning. Through the front window, I could see Oliver standing on a stool next to Carol, carefully decorating Christmas cookies with too much frosting and crooked little sprinkles. Frank was behind them, hanging another ornament on the tree, while some soft holiday movie played in the background. The sight of my son, happy, safe, loved, brought tears to my eyes. We spent the rest of Christmas Eve with Carol and Frank, decorating cookies, singing carols off-key, and watching Oliver's eyes light up as he helped Frank arrange the little figurines in the nativity scene on the coffee table. This, I realized as I watched my boy giggle and lean against Frank's shoulder, was what family was supposed to feel like. The next morning, Oliver was still asleep, sprawled out in his pajamas and surrounded by the presents Santa had brought when my phone rang. It was my Aunt Linda. "You might want to hear how things ended last night," she said, without any small talk. I sat down on the edge of my bed, bracing myself. "What happened?" "After you left, it was like a dam broke," she said. "Your Uncle Mark stood up and said he couldn't stay in that house another minute. Then I left. Then your Uncle Peter and his wife. Pretty soon, everyone was grabbing their coats and calling for their kids." I closed my eyes, picturing my parents standing in that crowded living room as people filed out. "Some people," she continued, "made it very clear why they were leaving. There were a lot of comments about manipulation and shame. Your parents tried to smooth things over, but nobody was buying it." "And Ryan?" I asked quietly. "Oh, he was furious," she said. "Packed up the kids right there. Told Megan he needed time to think about their marriage. Said he was taking the children to his parents' house for Christmas. Megan was in tears. Your parents were scrambling, but it was too late." I heard her take a breath. "I want you to know, Lauren, we're all on your side. What they did to you and Oliver is unforgivable." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, just absorbing everything. The house was quiet except for the soft snoring from Oliver's room and the faint ticking of the hallway clock. Then my phone started buzzing. Text after text from Mom, Dad, and Megan lit up my screen, all variations of the same message. "We're sorry. We were wrong. Please talk to us. We can explain." I read each one once, then I archived them without responding. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a peaceful blur. Oliver and I spent our evenings with Carol and Frank, playing board games at their dining table, watching holiday movies piled under blankets, and enjoying quiet, simple dinners where no one made me feel like I was failing. Oliver's laughter filled their house in a way that made my chest ache, but in a good way. Then, on New Year's Eve morning, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole and saw my parents standing on my porch, bundled in their coats, clutching a large, elaborately wrapped package. My heart thumped against my ribs as I debated whether to open the door. "Lauren, we know you're home," Mom called, her voice muffled through the door. "Please, we just want to talk." After a moment's hesitation, I unlocked the door and opened it, but I stayed firmly in the doorway, blocking their entrance. Up close, they looked smaller somehow, less imposing than they had at that Christmas party. "We brought this for Oliver," Dad said, holding out the package a little awkwardly. Through the wrapping paper, I could see the logo of an expensive electronics store stamped on the box. "He doesn't need it," I replied, making no move to take the gift. "Please, Lauren," Mom stepped forward, her eyes shiny. "We know we were wrong. The way we treated Oliver, the manipulation with the money, we're truly sorry. And we want you to know," Dad added quickly, "this isn't about the money you were sending us. We really do feel terrible about everything." I studied their faces, searching for something real under the practiced guilt. "Are you sorry," I asked quietly, "because you realize what you did was wrong? Or are you sorry because the entire family knows what you did and doesn't want anything to do with you right now?" They exchanged a glance, a tiny flicker of panic and embarrassment sliding between them, and in that brief look, I had my answer. "I think you should leave," I said. "I don't believe you, and I don't trust you. Not anymore." "But we're family," Mom protested, tears welling up. "No," I said, shaking my head. "Family doesn't manipulate each other. Family doesn't exclude a child from Christmas. Family doesn't scheme and lie to get money. What you did, that's not family." They stood there for another second, as if hoping I'd change my mind. When I didn't move, they finally turned away, still clutching the unwanted gift. Their soft apologies trailed behind them as they walked down the steps and back to their car. I watched them drive away and felt, not sadness, but relief. In the months that followed, I stuck to my decision. I didn't answer their calls. I didn't respond to their texts. Megan tried reaching out too, but eventually I blocked her number. The money that had been disappearing into my parents' account every month now went straight into Oliver's college fund instead. The funny thing about cutting toxic people out of your life is how much space it creates for better relationships to grow. My Aunt Linda started inviting us over for Sunday dinners. My Uncle Mark and his wife hosted barbecues where Oliver could run around the yard with his cousins until the sun went down. At every gathering, someone would kneel down to his level and ask about his latest drawing, his favorite book, or what he'd learned in science class that week. People didn't just tolerate his questions, they encouraged them. "Mom, why does Uncle Mark's pool have that funny smell?" Oliver asked one summer afternoon, wrinkling his nose as he dipped his toes in the water. "That's the chlorine, buddy," Uncle Mark answered before I could. He sat down on the edge of the pool and launched into a simple explanation about water treatment and chemical reactions that had Oliver completely fascinated. I stood back and watched my son bloom under that kind of attention and love. Love that didn't ask him to be quieter, smaller, less curious. He started calling Carol and Frank Grandma and Grandpa exclusively, and they never corrected him. If anything, they looked secretly honored every time he said it. They became our anchors, our safe harbor in any storm.